Добрый день, меня зовут Ник. Я работаю в компании Data Genetics. До этого я работал в компании Microsoft уже долго и Gamehouse тоже. Сегодня я буду говорить только по-английски, потому что я плохо говорю по-русски. Внимание, 1 год назад я говорил слишком быстро. Hi everyone, I'm Nick. Today I'm going to be talking a lot about math, but please do not panic. Every slide, and there will be many, many slides today, is available online, so sit back, put your pens down, just relax and look at the pictures. I've done many things, it's not very interesting, but today I work for myself as a consultant. We're going to start by playing a game. Let's imagine I roll one die. If it turns out to be a 1, a 2, or a 3, I'm going to give you $1. If it's a 4, 5, or 6, you give me $1. So the question I'm going to ask everybody here is, would you play this game? I think we'd play the game. Let's change the rules. Now, the 3 moves from this side to here. If it's a 1 or a 2, I give you $1. If it's a 3, 4, 5, or 6, you give me $1. Would you play the game now? Anybody? No. If we wanted to find out whether this was a good idea or a bad idea, there are 2 basic ways we could find out whether it was a good idea or a bad idea. The first is experimentation. We would roll the die many times and repeat the same example every time. The second is to create a formal model, create a little tree. There are 2 chances out of 6 that we would get this number. The advantages of experimentation is it's very easy to write. We just model a game. And you don't need to understand the complex mechanics that are going on within the game. The difficulty is that we may have to, if it's a very complicated game, play the game many times before we get an accurate model of the percentages. And something that is very subtle, if there is one part of the game that doesn't happen very often, maybe only happens 1 in a million times, unless we model it many millions of times, we're not going to exercise that part of the tree that decides whether it's a good idea or not. If we did a formal model, we'll get an exact answer straight away, but it's very complicated to write. And people talk about this as an objective approach, or you'll hear people talk about a Bayesian approach towards things. This shows the difference between the 2 of those particular things. If I roll the 1 die to get the results, the expected result we can work out mathematically straight away. It's a very simple way of doing it. If we were going to model the game with experimentation, it will take many runs before we actually get on the correct answer. Now we've got the basics, let's make our game a little bit more complicated. Let's say we roll 3 dice. And these rules are very complicated. They were just meant as an example. But if there are 3 odd numbers, we're going to re-roll the 2 lowest numbers. If there are 2 odd numbers, we're going to re-roll just the lowest number. And then we're going to add them all up. If the total's odd, we're going to have the highest number again. If it's over 17, I give you $7. Otherwise, you give me $3. The question is now, would you play this game? I have no idea. If we try to do a subjective approach, it's very complicated to model. First of all, we roll 1 dice, and then we roll another one, and then we roll another one, and then we find out the highest number. It gets very complicated very quickly. I just wouldn't want to think about doing it that way. So instead, we'll do a Monte Carlo simulation, which is named after the casino. What we do is we play the game by randomly rolling the dice, following the rules, and find out what the results are. Yes, it's named after the casino. And here's now an example output of what happens. It's very spiky because of the odd or even number of games, but we said it was 17. In this particular case, we had 76% of the time here, 23% of the time. We lose $3. We win $7. So the answer is we're going to lose about 66 cents a game. So should we play the game? Probably not. Okay, that out of the way, let's talk about some real-world examples, real games that people actually play. So in England and America, we have a game of snakes and ladders. And it's a game that my kids love to play as well. So the question is, how long should a game of snakes and ladders last? Here's a board. These show the ladders and the snakes. The shortest possible way is to do it in 7 moves. You can roll this number, and this number. And there's the various different ways of playing the game. But how long does the game really last? With Monte Carlo simulation, we can play the game and again and again and again. And I wrote some QD programs. We played 1 billion games. And you can see here the percentage chance of finishing the game within a certain number of moves. And the modal answer is 20. The most likely number of moves a game of snakes and ladders will take is 20 moves. Here is a graph of the cumulative probability, which is how many games take that number of moves or less. And we can see that, thankfully, most games finish in less than 100 moves. And the median number is 29. As many games take longer than 29 moves as take less than 29 moves. So again, it's just what kind of average you're looking for. The most likely number of moves is 20. The median number is going to be 29. And the average, the arithmetic mean, after those billion games, I roll the dice 36.2 billion times in order to be able to get the answer of the average. If we want to do a subjective approach, we can use something called Markov Chains, which is named after a famous mathematician. And what he says is, you can model things based on a series of states. Today, I'm in state 1. Tomorrow, I could be in a different state. I could be in state 2, or state 3, or state 4. And what you do in Markov analysis, a Markov chain, is work out the probabilities that if I'm in this state, I'll be in this state tomorrow. And there are various different ways you can go, and you can also stay in the same state as well. And there is a branch of mathematics called stochastics. But what it actually says is that if I'm on this particular square in Chutes and Ladders, there are 6 possible squares that I can go to by rolling the dice. Crucial to this is the concept of a memoryless system. What it needs to be is you're agnostic. You don't care how you got to square G, but if you're on square G, what are the chances that I'll be on these other squares on my next move? And all the probabilities has to add up to 1.0. This is what stochastic means. Something has to happen. You're on square G, you're going to go to one of these other squares on your next roll. And what we do is we create a matrix that you model the system by a series of states, and you calculate and enter into here a probability that you'll be in this state and you'll transfer to this state. So I'm going to walk through an example of this. Here, imagine we're on square 11. This is square 11. There is a 1/6 chance that we're going to square 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Everything on this row adds up to 1. You have to move to some other square. Now it gets a little bit more complicated because we have snakes and we have ladders. Here now, if you imagine on square 18, there is a 1/6 chance we go to square 19, 1/6 chance we go to 20. Uh-oh, we lied down the snake and we end up in square 9, 21, 22. And if we got to 23, we can't sit on square 23, we go up to 28. So now we have a slightly more separated thing, but still, everything on this row adds up to 1 because something has to happen. We have to change state. You have to be a little bit careful because some squares you can get to more than one way. If I'm on square 50, there is square 53 here. I can get to by rolling a 3, 1, 2, 3. But if I also roll 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I slide back down the snake again. So there is actually a 2/6 chance of landing on square 53. And also, when you get to the end, in our house, you don't need an exact number to finish the game. Oh, excuse me. So there is a 4. If you're on square 97, there are 4 chances out of 6 that you'll get to square 100. So now this is the transition matrix in action. We have this large matrix that works out whatever square we're going to be on, what is the probability of ending up at some other square. We put in a starting state, and everybody starts the game off the board. Multiply by the transition matrix, and we get the ending state. Here's an example of the board. We start off at square 0, which is off the board. We roll the dice, and here is the probability that will be all these other squares. There is a 1/6 chance we'll be at all these squares. You can see the ladder here and the ladder there. This is the beauty of Markov chain analysis, because what we do now is we take the ending state, we feed it back all the way back into the beginning, multiply again, and we get a new ending state. Let's see that in action. So now, here are all the possible starting moves that could be in for roll 1. We move on, and now you can see the probability will be on roll 2. It's a superposition of all the probabilities. Then we have roll 3, and roll 4, and 5. We can see the probability cloud moving along, 6. When we get to move 7, there is a non-zero probability of actually finishing the game, and roll 8. By the time we get to roll 20, you can see I don't know whether you can make it the contrast here. By roll 100, pretty much all the games are finished. Here's if this works, this will be an animation you can see moving through the game. More and more of the games are finishing. This is the plot that we get using the Markov analysis, which gives us an exact answer. And if we compare the two curves together from the formal model and an experimentation model, you'll find that they're pretty close, which is good. The difference is only due to the randomness of rolling it a billion times. A couple of trivia takeaways. There's this particular ladder here that you can only ever use the first time, because you have to roll a 1, use that ladder. You can never get back to square 1, and so there's no surprise that this ladder is used 16% of the time. There's also another bit of interesting trivia, that adding a snake can decrease the average number of moves. How come? Because if you land on a snake, you only ever go backwards. And the answer is, there's a very long ladder here, and if you put an extra snake in that gives you a second chance to use that large ladder, if you miss it the first time but you land on a snake, you have a second attempt to go ahead and use that ladder. So it can actually decrease the length of the game. Second example, Candyland. If we've all played Candyland. This is not a memoryless system, because with Candyland you have a lot of cards, you draw a card from the game, and it gets put in the discard pile. It's not a memoryless system, because if you use up some of the cards, they're not gone anymore. To model this using a Markov chain, we need a memoryless system. So we're approximating it by doing something called a crippled Markov chain that says we're going to draw a card, act on it, then put the card back in and shuffle the deck again, and then draw another card. So every single time, all we're doing is just replaying the same deck with shuffling the cards. We model the board, and we create a transition matrix again based on all the cards that are in the deck. And you can see playing the game. I think I have an animation. The first game, 2, 3, 4. This tells you the percentage chance of games that have won after those number of moves. Oh. Here, where we compare the Monte Carlo to the Markov chain, you'll see there's a slight difference again because we've approximated it by putting the card back, and you'll see there's an inflection point here. When you play and you don't replace the cards, every single card in the deck would have been used, and you get to a certain number, then you have to reshuffle them again. When you do the putting the card back, there is a chance that you'll never actually exercise some of the cards. So there is a difference between them when we do the replacement strategy or not. Next example, Texas Holdem poker. If anybody plays poker here, the question is, what is the best starting hand when playing poker? The odds are very complicated because you work out the superposition of chances of making flushes and straights and pairs. And the odds change depending on the number of people at the table. If 2 people are playing poker and there is we call it a gut shot, an open-ended straight on the table, a straight that is missing 1 card, with 2 people, the chances of somebody having the card to complete the straight is very, very low. With 10 players playing the game, somebody's bound to have the card that completes the straight. So the average hand required to win increases the number of players at the table. The number of odds, there are billions of combinations. So again, it's not really possible to formally model this. So we can work through a Monte Carlo style simulation. Here's an example of showing it with 2 players at the table. Here are a pair of aces, kings, queens, jacks, all the way down to a pair of 2s. The hands are shaded in color depending on the probability. These are suited cards, ace, king suited, ace, queen suited, and these are unsuited cards. And when 2 players are playing, it seems that there's very little difference between a suited and unsuited cards. By the time that you get to 10 players playing the game, you'll see that there's a lot of odds shifting over to this side. You really need suited cards to have a good hand. And what we call connected cards, Jack 7, 7, 8, 9, 10, Jack. Those are 2 cards that could possibly make a straight. So they're much higher in value than other cards over here, which normally would have been good hands when staying with 2 players. Final example that I would talk about, Risk. If people have played Risk. The basic mechanics of the game is the attacker rolls up to 3 dice, the defender rolls 2 dice. The highest dice wins, but in a tie, the defender wins. Modeling this, we could go various different formal models, but in this case, there are only 7,776 possible combinations of dice. So rather than trying to build a table, just write some brain-dead code to go through all the possible combinations and work out who wins. And this is what happens. This is 3 dice against 2 dice, 3 dice against 1 dice, and all the probabilities. That's for a basic battle when it's just 3 against 2. What happens when you have larger armies? And here we can build up a tree and a recursive way of doing things. Imagine we have an attacker with 7 attackers against 5 defenders. Remembering back to our model over here, 3 against 2, there's a 2,890 or 776 that goes through. I'm putting it into here. From here, there is a certain chance that the defender loses 2. There's a certain chance that the attacker loses 1 and the defender loses 1. And here we have a attacker loses 2 of them. And we work out the probabilities of this, and then nested, we go to the next one, all the way until we get to the end of the chain where we know the probabilities, and we can then recurse back up the tree. Here are the results. You're not supposed to be able to read this. It's very mouse type, but shade them in. Here we can shade the area where this is where the attacker has the advantage, and this is where the defender has the advantage. And we can see that there's an inflection point. After attack of 5 above 5, the advantage goes to the attacker rather than the defender. So if you're playing risk, strategy, it's better to attack than defend. So if you're playing risk, be very aggressive. Always attack with superior numbers to maximize the chance of your attack being successful. The higher the ratio of attack defenders, the much higher probability of a 95% confidence. And if you're attacking with the same number of armies, make sure that you have at least 5 armies in your favor. Moving this into the social world and social games, which I know a lot of people are interested in, what happens if you get it wrong? Imagine you have a social game or a massively online game where people can buy real-world currency and convert it to your in-game currency. And in the game, you have a little virtual casino. What is the value of the shield? Our player in the game decides he'd like to buy this shield, and the in-game currency is 10 gold pieces, and he has a certain amount of money. But rather than buying this for 10 gold pieces, he goes into the virtual casino that you've built into the game and gambles, and you haven't got the mathematics correct for the game in your casino, and all of a sudden he can make money very, very quickly. The value of this shield really isn't worth 10 gold pieces anymore. It's worth 10,000 gold pieces because money is easy to get. If you've provided a way to get using real money in the real world to buy currency, he's rapidly beginning to become disenfranchised with your game. He's spent a certain amount of money to buy currency, and now the currency is not worth anything because anybody can get currency. And if you don't control it correctly, you will have rampant inflation in your game, whatever the value of your currency is supposed to be. And to stop inflation, there really needs to be a fixed amount of currency in the game. When you have ways that people can make money, you also have to have sinks in the game where they can actually spend the money and the money disappears from the game. It can be hard to do because even if you control the money, most of the time when people join a social game, they're given free pocket money when they arrive, a small amount of money. And since you can't control the number of players in the game, it can be quite hard to stop money flowing into the game. So the takeaway from this is that you need to understand the expected value of your games if you're putting them in there. More examples of this, and I promise all the slides. If you go to the site Data Genetics, there's a particular content tab there. So today's presentation, all the slides that I've talked about will be there. And with that, I finished on time. I have time for a couple of questions, or if not, I have some extra slides. No questions? Perfect.